Good evening, sir. We'll start the meeting in 2 minutes.
Sure, Vaidehi.
Good evening, everyone present over here. As we embark on our much awaited event, Voyager 2021, we bring to you the most fun, exciting events and insightful workshops and talks. I extend a very warm welcome to all the respected faculty members, students, and all the guests who have joined us today. I am Vaidehi Sonavne and I'll be your host for today's event organized by IEEE VIT. IEEE is the world's largest technical organization dedicated in advancing technology for the benefit of humanity with over 4 million members. It also includes a global network of IEEE members and volunteers dedicated to promoting women engineers and scientists and inspiring girls around the world to follow their academic interests in a career in engineering and science. IEEE VIT comes under Bombay section. We are dedicated to conducting events matching the interests of students from various domains. Adding to our accomplishments, IEEE VIT captured the IEEE Regional Exemplary Student Branch Award for 2020. We have our most decorative events, our flagship events, Iris and Voyager. We also conduct many such great events which include competitions, seminars, IEEE Day, all of which are celebrated with great enthusiasm at IEEE VIT. I would like to brief you about Voyager. Voyager is an expedition of cutting-edge technology, an amalgamation of competitions, tech talks, workshops, and enchanting fun events. Voyager 2021 is all set to have events such as Shark Tank, Codager, Tinker Your Circuit, TED Talks, Wriggle Scribble, and workshops. And today we have with us Mr. Hitesh Hinduja, a senior and lead data scientist at Ola Electric and ANI Technologies, a machine learning, deep learning, and cloud AWS expert. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us to share your immense knowledge about machine learning interpretation with us. I would now request you to please begin.
Thank you, Vaidehi, for the introduction. So, yeah, I hope I'm visible. Okay, so this has been a traditional asking. So, am I visible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay, cool. So, hello everyone, respected teachers, faculties, and students. So, my name is Hitesh Hinduja, and I work as a lead data scientist at Ola. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my knowledge in terms of industry, how Ola works, and something about the machine learning interpretability. So, I'll give a quick introduction about myself. So, I have been in this industry since last 7.5 years now, and I started my journey with Deloitte. I moved on to Reliance Geo and worked in Godrej Boys, couple of startups, and after that, I began my research journey. So I started working as a researcher at IIM Ahmedabad under one of the professors. And after my research journey at IIM Ahmedabad, I moved on to another part of research, which was at Indian School of Business, Hyderabad. So again, I was working there as a researcher for 6 months under a faculty. And this is where my research journey started. Post my research journey, I started my research come corporate journey at Accenture. So Accenture was the first, I would say, a corporate journey in terms of research as well. So I was working in Accenture India Research in Bangalore in oil and gas sector. Post my journey in Accenture for last, like let's say around 14 months to be precise. After that, I moved on to a company named Quantify, which is an AI/ML company. So I was working there as a senior machine learning engineer at Quantify. And after my stint at Quantify for 1+ years, I moved on to Ola. So everyone knows about Ola. It's a ride-hailing company. I joined ANI Technologies, Ola Cabs, and I was working in fleet management of Ola and as a lead data scientist. And after working in OFT for say around four to 5 months, I got an opportunity to move across in Ola Electric. So Ola Electric is one of the subsidiaries of Ola. Sorry for the interruptions. I have a small pet. So yeah. So after Ola Fleet, I moved on to Ola Electric again. I'm working here as a lead data scientist. So I lead a team of 15 people at Ola, and so in Ola Electric again, it's there is something known as Smart Mobility Labs, where which is basically a centralized lab. So we also handle the use cases of Ola Fleet as well as electric, as well as Ola Financial Services, as well as Ola Mobility, all the sectors across it. Okay, so I've been in this journey with Ola since last 16 months now, and yeah, and along in this corporate research journey, I'm also a corporate trainer, lecturer for data science, machine learning, especially statistics, and it depends in for computer vision as well. So I'm also a corporate trainer. I've trained many people in Deloitte, TCS, and a couple of startups. And along with that, I was also a trainer for quantitative examinations like CAT, GMAT, GRE. I was at IMS for around 13 months, where I was working as a part-time trainer along with my full-time jobs. So that's how it has been. And in this 7.5, 8 years of journey, I have 13 papers published on my name. So it's in IEEE publications. I have a couple of IEEE publications in pattern recognition journals. Plus, I've also published a paper in ICCV conference and across some of the other conferences and publications. Along with my paper publications, I have also published and filed patents throughout my journey in corporates and research areas. So I filed across 13 patents in and across 7.5 years. And most of my patents have been in the field of artificial intelligence statistics combined together. Yeah. So this is a short introduction about myself. And yeah. So today's topic, I would like to present my screen. But before that, let me tell you the topic name is machine learning interpretability. So just to give an idea about it, uh, in companies or in corporates, right? It's not just about running machine learning models like let's say XGBoost or gradient boosting machine or any of the models like random forest, regression, and all. It's also about how do you interpret the data. Okay, like when you get the results, how do you convince the leadership or senior people that these are the reasons for which you should scale your model? Okay, because what happens in industry, it's not just a small data set, it's on a huge data. Like in Ola, I handle at least 10 terabytes of data per day. So if you see the scale of that data, it's almost 10 terabytes streaming, and all the machine learning models are running on the cloud. And what happens is, so we incur huge tech cost, we incur huge managing cost across the clouds, right? So it's not that easy to just run the models, come up with the results, and that's it, and just have a inferencing to it. It's not just that. So machine learning interpretability is something where whatever predictions you get in real life, okay, I'll try to be as less technical as possible and much clear in this talk so that you guys will get an idea from a business perspective as well. Okay, so in machine learning interpretability, it's about why the predictions have come. Like, let's say a very simple example, if I say it's going to rain tomorrow, okay, so in business they actually ask you what are the reasons for which it is going to rain tomorrow. And in that case, you can't just give on a very high level reason saying that whenever we run various machine learning models, right, we get variable importance graphs. So you might be aware of these variable importance like random forest, XGBoost, all the algorithms give you importance. So that doesn't mean that you will take the list of the variables and give it to the leadership saying that, okay, these are the variables for which are letting you predict that it's going to rain or it's not going to rain. Okay, so what are the other techniques which helps business understand the exact requirement is something which we would be discussing today. Okay, so I'll quickly share my screen. Just give me a minute. So Vaidehi, is the option enabled for my screen sharing?
Yes, sir. I'll recheck and tell you, but most probably it is on.
Okay, can you see, is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Okay, okay. So let's start with it, guys. So today's agenda, we would be learning about what is machine learning interpreter, why is it important from a business standpoint, why is machine learning interpretability difficult, and why do people avoid doing it, and how do people do it will be the third point. And then we would be getting into different methodologies of machine learning interpretability, and here you would see some techniques which I've mentioned, which is SHAP and LIME. These are some techniques which we would be understanding in detail in this talk. And the last one would be the real world use case. Okay, which is like, let's take, I would be giving you a practical example of maybe Ola and giving you an example of how we are using machine learning interpretability in Ola use cases. Okay. 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 Now let's see this here. So machine learning interpreter. So see, what happens, guys, is let's say about deep learning. Okay. So in deep learning, if I let me make it more precise, what exactly I'm telling by writing it here. Let's say in deep learning, these are my neurons. Okay. Let's say this is something my hidden layer. Let's take an example. This is hidden layer. This is like input layer, and this is my output layer. Okay, so what happens is, guys, in deep learning is, let's say whatever features you see here, this is feature one, this is feature two, this is feature three. Okay, all these features actually combine together and a new feature gets created here in hidden layers. Okay, but in these complex technologies like deep learning, or let's say I would say little complex in classical machine learning like random forest or XGBoost, right? In that case, we actually don't know what variables are getting created, especially in the deep learning algorithms. So in classical machine learning algorithms, we do know about it. There is something known as feature engineering, where we create features from the existing features and we come up with the new features. But in deep learning algorithms, it's very rare these days that we have the strong interpretability techniques where we know what is happening inside the hidden layers. So this concept of what is happening inside the hidden layers, which is unaware, is something known as a black box concept. Okay, so that is where business is much interested to understand. Hey, explain me what is happening inside that layer. Okay, so there is a huge trade-off between the interpretable models and the business models. Okay, So that's why you see that we have a input data in real time, something is performed using deep learning algorithms, and we get the output. Whereas when it comes to classical machine learning algorithms, what happens is we have the input data, we do some kind of feature engineering, we get the predictions, we become greedy to improve our accuracies, like let's say precision, recall, F1 score, all these accuracies depending on the type of the task we are performing, like regression, classification, clustering. Okay, so we become greedy to just improve the accuracy of that model. But what about, let's say, when a new set of data is coming into picture, like let's say a data which your training data has not even seen it. Okay, or maybe I would say not the actual test data. So what happens in that case is, since we are so much relied on machine learning algorithms and expecting our machine learning algorithms to perform well on the test data, due to that reasons, the drift in the data is not being handled by these models, because we don't know what variables in real time are actually going to impact our data. Getting? So in that case, which all variables have how much of significance in the prediction is something which machine learning interpretability plays a major role in. Like let's say if you want to predict something, what is the importance of each and every variable in that prediction is nothing but the task of machine learning interpretability. Okay, so let's move on to next. So saying which is said that interpretability is a degree to which a human can understand the cause of the decision. So again, the Tim Miller, this guy is very famous. He has written so many books across in social sciences, psychometric analysis, as well as econometrics. So again, it's very true. Like whenever you want to make a decision, okay, there are some influencing factors to make a decision. Now, not just knowing the influencing factors is not important, but also knowing what is the factor of that variable, like how much important that variable plays a role into the prediction is something machine learning interpreter does. Okay, so to just to give an idea to you guys, and there are like many colleges across India as well as outside India who have professors working on machine learning interpretability as their fields of research. Okay, so Professor Stephanie Jegilka, and there are many professors like this who are associated with MIT, Stanford, Harvard, these colleges who actually work on machine learning interpretability, semi-supervised learning algorithms, which are a part of machine learning interpretability. And it's a complete field for them, and there is a complete PhD inside machine learning interpretability. So we'll see a very small chunk, maybe 5% of it today, to give you guys an idea how ML interpreter works. Okay. So now let's take an example. Like let's take an example in many cases where do we need to make important decisions. Like let's say in loan credit card applications, right? Let's take an example of Diners Black credit card. So Diners Black credit card is a very premium credit card. Okay, so what happens is they have the cutoffs for that credit card. Like let's say a person should be earning more than 1.5 to 1.6 lakh per month. Okay, but what they observe is just keeping a simple cutoff of salary bracket of a person. Rather, we should not just see the salary bracket, but the spending capacity of the person. Like, let's take an example. A person who is earning 1 lakh rupees a month, if he's also spending 10 times more than a person earning 1.7 or 1.5 lakhs in a month, so how do you decide which person should be given a credit card? So this is one of the important decision making, one of the application. Now, how ML interpretability will be used, I'll come to that a little later in this piece. Like next application is like, let's say to diagnose the cancer, right? Like malignant and benign. This is a very famous classification problem which most of the machine learning engineers, the budding up machine learning engineers, the freshers, they have been doing it as a part of their case studies or during the courses in data science and machine learning. Okay, so in that case, if I tell if a person is having a tumor, okay, or if a person is not having a tumor, if a person is having a tumor, what are the reasons, with what reasons and what confidence are you telling the person is having a tumor? So in healthcare industries, guys, you know, F1 score and all matters a lot. F1 score is very critical in healthcare industries. Like when I was working in IIM Ahmedabad, I had to predict the lifespan of a person who is affected by HIV AIDS people. So in that case, predicting the lifespan was not just sufficient. Like if I tell to a person that, hey, you are going to live just 3 years down the line, that's not right. This is not just the important decision. But if you can improve his lifespan or give him recommendations by telling him, okay, you need to change this part of yours in your life cycle, like you need to take medications on time and you need to maintain your diet. So all these are, let's say, variables to my model which help me predict saying that he will be living for next 3 years. So how and what variable in what importance you would say and help him understand the life of a person is something what ML interpreter does. Okay. And one more example. Okay. Now let's say Ola. Now in Ola, we have 40,000 fleet of vehicles. So we have fleet of vehicles where we lease our own vehicles to the driver. Okay. Now it being our own vehicle, it's very important to understand how well the driver is driving our vehicle, like how well he is handling a vehicle and what is this performance? Is the driver happy or no? So many drivers leave the platform and they stop driving and they return as the vehicle back. Okay. Now that's a loss to business. Why? Because let's say if I own a 40,000 fleet of vehicles and if the drivers are coming and telling, okay, we are not making money or we are, let's say, not getting bookings and we won't drive your vehicle, our fleet of vehicles would go for a toss. Like we have incurred so much of cost to buy those vehicles and maintain those vehicles. So how do we understand that the driver is not going to leave the Ola platform and how do we keep him happy is something which is also one of the use cases in ML interpretability. Now, what is ML interpretability here is we would be getting into next slides. But to just give you an idea, if a driver is leaving the platform, okay, we just can't identify and keep it and tell to the city teams or the business teams saying that, hey, okay, the driver is leaving the platform, that's it. This is not the use case which we have to do. What is the use case we have to do is like we have to give a probability that driver will leave the platform and try to tackle that probability and make the driver not leave the platform. Okay. Now, how would we do that is by first understanding what are the factors that are leading for a driver to leave the platform. Like let's say he's not getting bookings or he's getting too much of share bookings, or let's say we are incurring penalty on him because he is not being able to take 10 bookings or 15 bookings in a day. So like this, what is the reason for which he is leaving the platform is something which needs to come up on each and every prediction value. For every driver, every day this model gets run. And whenever we observe that the probability of driver leaving the platform is higher, at that point of time, we try to get the reasons through our ML interpreter techniques and we make sure that the driver is not leaving the platform. Okay, so now what are those techniques is something we would be getting into picture. So again, this is some more examples, but I would not get into this much. So, okay. So this I was explaining about the neural networks. As I say, the interpretability has decreased from classical machine learning. So in 1950s, 1960s, there were so many powerful statistical tests, which are no doubt used by statisticians today as well. But the budding data scientists today are much focused on running the model, getting the results, and that's it. But they don't focus on like a pipeline of machine learning tasks which have to be performed. Like let's say correlations. Now correlation is not just Pearson's correlation. There are several types of correlations, Pearson's correlation, Spearman's correlation. And like this, there are many correlations. Like in numerical values, you use Pearson's correlation. For ordinal values, you use Spearman's correlation. And for understanding the correlation between categorical values, you use Thiel's U coefficient. And like this, there are multiple techniques which are actually used. And these are nothing but subsets to the interpretability as well. Why? Because anything which improves your data and helps your training data to learn better will help you also interpret the models in a very good way when you are building a model. So I would say as a data scientist is 70% of the time should be spent on understanding the data, understanding the correlations, using several statistical tests like stratified sampling to get a good chunk of data, And then once we get the good chunk of data, the rest 30% of the time should be spent on, let's say, running the models and all those things. And in this 70%, it also consists of understanding the domain well, doing feature engineering. Just for your information, guys, feature engineering is nothing but creating new features. So today in data, we get raw variables. Like let's say in Ola, we would be getting odometer reading, we would be getting the fuel, we would be getting mileage. But what are feature engineering variables is something which we create from the existing features. So that all together forms the part of 70% of understanding of the business, and the rest 30% forms your data, this thing, data modeling, use any kind of models. So in that case, you won't be able to run all the models. Like usually what happens is today's machine learning engineers, they run all the models. Like if it's a regression problem, they would take linear regression, lasso regression, ridge regression, they will run random forest, they will run XGBoost, they will run GBM. But every data or every, I would say, a business use case demands different kinds of models. Okay. If there is more interpretability needed, there is one kind of model which is involved. If there is less interpretability needed, there is one kind of model involved. So like this, we would see what kinds of models also are used in what situations in today's PPT. Also, we would be seeing what are the techniques used after the models have been run. Okay, so so now why is machine learning interpreted difficult? So it is said that data will often point with almost equal emphasis on several possible models. So as I was saying, data, so machine is something which is definitely smart, no doubt, but it will behave similar in all the models if you are giving a data in a very simple form to it. Some models might perform very well, while some models might perform a medium level thing, which so it depends on how non-linear your data is, how linear your data is. But the question comes is, how would you shape the data smartly using several statistical tests, and how you would accurately reflect the data to basically interpret your models is a very difficult task. So that's why it says the question of which one most accurately reflects the data is difficult to solve. So how do you reflect the data to the business is nothing but machine learning interpretability. Okay. Okay. Now let's get into what are different methodologies. Okay, I'll start from very basic. You guys might have experienced people who have started studying machine learning, or I would say algorithmic machine learning. They would be knowing about certain steps in this. In case people are not aware, whenever we'll be in a questionnaire session, please feel free to ask me questions on that. So, okay. So what is surrogate model? Surrogate model is again a very simple model where inputs are given, the prediction is happening, and you need to identify the relationship between that. So it's a very fancy model wherein you don't do much kind of statistical test. You would be doing very basic statistical tests, like let's say Pearson's and all those things. Very basic, like I would say not even more than Pearson. And you would drop the highly correlated variables, get the output, become greedy to take which model which is giving you the best accuracy, and that's it. Okay, then comes a little advanced version to it. Okay, like let's say tree interpreters. Okay, so what does tree interpreters do is, you might be knowing, they come up with feature importance, right? It measures. So this is being done on a complete data set. Like whenever you fit a model, right, whenever you dot fit a function in machine learning model, right, and that is a time where machine learning algorithm learns from the training data. And once it learns, what it does is it gives you a feature importance or variable importance of each and every variable. So here you would see on the right is something nothing but the columns which are highly important. Now this is on a complete data set on an average. So let's say yours Code Pro, let's not get into much technical what the use case is, but let's say yours Code Pro has maximum importance, organization size has a less importance. Like this, it's declining. The variable importance is declining. But guys, let me tell you something. Okay, here the importance which is coming years Code Pro is on an average. Okay, it's on an average in a complete data set. But it might happen in a specific row of data. Like let's say you have 5 rows of data. maybe in row number 1, 2, 3, and 5, this variable is coming extremely important. But in row number 4, whenever you are predicting the row number 4, maybe it's not coming important and there are some other variables coming important. So what happens is at that point of time, the algorithm thinks, okay, this variable is very important on an overall level. Okay, it will say, okay, if it's not important on 1 out of 5 records, please let's ignore it. Let's give it as a variable importance because at least it's coming important in 4 out of 5 rows of predictions. Okay, so this is how the feature important works. It is on a global picture of the feature. So if you see, it's a relative score for each and every feature. So like if you add this up, it should account to 1. Okay, it's a relative score, like how important is this variable compared to this variable. But when you see it on a global picture, it is on a set of data. It is on a complete set of data, not just on a individual row of data. But what if I want to understand, if I am predicting something today, if I want to know what are the features which are important for today's data, at that point of time, this interpreter will fail. It will again give you these same 6 variables because it just knows to have an importance on a complete data set rather than having it on an independent record. Okay, so these are some basic techniques which many of the data scientists, I would say 90% of the data scientist people try and test this across. And now, so what are the rest 10% of the data scientists do? Okay, the rest 10% of the data scientists is something, but they use 2 techniques. Okay, one is known as LIME, which is LIME. It's basically spelled as local interpretable model agnostic explanations. And there is one more technique which is known as SHAP. Okay, which is SHAP. We would be getting into it. It's known as Shapley Additive Performance Based explanation basically, and we would be getting into that as well. But let's understand what this interpretability technique does. I might not be able to get into math of it, but I would be trying to at least explain you how these techniques are used today as well in the industries. Okay, this is being used today as well in the industries. Okay, like let's take an example on the left. Okay, if we see, this is a photo of, let's say, a frog. Okay, now let's say these are different instances. Like let's say this is the first photo, this is the second photo, and this is the third photo, which is a clearly visible photo. Okay, now what happens is, guys, let's say in any of the machine learning tasks, like let's say in your deep learning algorithms to identify an object, or let's say when I was explaining you about the driver attrition, that if the driver is going to leave the platform, right? On a higher level, there will be reasons given on a complete data set that either the driver is leaving the platform due to not making money, either the driver is leaving the platform due to maybe, let's say, not getting enough of bookings, either the driver is leaving the platform due to getting too many share bookings, or either the driver is leaving the platform because he feels that the salary compensation, or let's say the salary what he receives per week or in every 10 days is better in Uber or in a competitor. Basically, there can be n number of reasons like this, but there are some top 4 5 reasons which are actually highlighted when a driver wants to leave the platform. Okay, but how do I know that the driver wants to leave the platform, that specific driver on that day, rather than giving on a very generalized level that these are the 4 reasons? Okay, so what Lime does is, it's better than a black box model. Again, it is called as approximately a black box model, but because what happens is in the backend, what Lime is using, we are still not aware of it, but it at least helps us solve the problem. Now, what do I mean by that is, let me give you an example. Okay, just give me 2 minutes. I'll show you one example. Okay, yeah. So let's take this example of how Lime works. Okay, here you have to classify whether it's a atheism or whether it's not an atheism. Okay, and if I give you this complete text of data, what you see here. Okay, now reading the text, you can just classify it, right? Like you can do sentiment analysis, you can do lot many things. But let's say what this tells is the prediction probabilities. So here it is basically telling on the left is there is a 50% chance that it's a class of atheism, 43% chance that it's a class of Christian, the 5% chance that the religion is miscellaneous, and like this, there are probabilities associated with it. Okay, now it says that there is a 50% chance that it's an atheism. Okay, now what are the reasons for the model to call him atheism for that specific row or that for this specific text of data? So think it like this is your testing data and this is just one row of the data which you see here. So what are the reasons that it is calling that it's the class of atheism? Okay, so here we will see the blue color ones, okay, are nothing but telling you that it is a class of atheism and are supporting by telling that the model is classifying it as atheism. Like let's say it's reading some words like cost, rise, genocide. Okay, so when you read this statement here, right? When you read this statement like genocide, it has cost something or anything of that sort, such kind of thing are making it believe that it's the class of atheism. Okay, so here for every row of data, okay, listen to this very carefully. This is one part of your testing data. It's just one row of your testing data. For this row of testing data, when it's classifying atheism, it's telling you what are the words or basically what are the reasons on a higher level which is making it classify as an atheism thing. Now here you will see some number associated with it. Like let's say 0.26, 0.14, 0.13. These are nothing but the importance or the probability, I would say, the relative probability that this is one of the important words from all the set of words for this row of data which is helping it classify as an atheism. Like this, not just for classifying it. So in driver type, I was telling you, right? Like let's say if I want to predict it for this driver, he would be giving me the order in which the driver is facing the problem. So there might be 5 problems out of like let's say 10 problems. Okay. Now in this 5 problems, it will give me what is the first, second, and third important problem with what is the probability of that being the problem and what is the probability of driver leaving the platform completely is nothing but completely given by this tool named Lime. Okay, now sometimes it so happens the other way around. Like let's say if I want to classify that the driver is not going to leave the platform, so it will come into, let's say, on the left hand side part of the cursor which I am showing it to you. So there it will also tell you what are the reasons for which the driver is not going to leave the platform. Maybe the top reasons which the Lime will give is, let's say, he is earning, let's say, 5,000 rupees a day. Okay, he is getting 20 bookings in a day and he is very happy with that thing. Okay, compared to other drivers, this is a lot. These number of bookings and earning is a lot. Okay, so it tells you a positive probability that he will not leave a platform along with the top 3 reasons for that driver, which is basically telling that he will not leave the platform. So as you saw in this case, give me a minute. In this case, when I was telling you about these 3 interpreters, right? This will not give you for each and every driver. This will give you on all the set of drivers. Among all the drivers, what is the major reason that the driver is going to leave the platform? But when it comes to Lime, this is how it interprets the machine learning model, what the machine learning model is predicting. Okay, so this was about the Lime. Okay, so here also you would see the right side of the graph. What you are seeing are nothing but some types of variables like total cost of insurance, age of the insured person, claim type, loan type, capital, interest, loan seniority. Now I would say the right side of the part is contributing to the probability of the model. Like if it's saying that, okay, this person should be given a loan, what are the factors that are telling that this person should be given a loan? Now, over and above that, it's also telling you like total cost of insurance, let's say here it's showing too high. So maybe if it's showing too high, I would not give a loan to this person. Okay. And let's say claim type, or let's say loan seniority, or let's say interest rate, like this, each and every variable for each and every decision will help you determine if the person should get a loan or no. And it will be at a person level, it will be at the row level. What do I mean by row level is, let's say driver is planning to leave the platform today. We should identify 15 days before. But what if the driver is not planning to leave the platform after 30 days? Okay, like we have resolved his problem. He's not planning to leave the platform. At that point of time, our model should also tell that it's not going to leave the platform, and the reasons for it should be the opposite to which the driver is leaving the platform. Like, let's say previously he was not making money, he was not getting bookings, so we will try to give him more and more bookings. He will take more and more bookings. And let's say if we have tackled that and he has not left the platform, it's a win-win situation for Ola. Why? Because we would be getting driver earnings, the vehicle would be constantly on the road, because to onboard the other driver when a driver is leaving the platform also takes time. So the TAT, which is nothing but turnaround time, the earnings what we are doing, we will get lots of earnings in that phase if the driver remains in the system. Okay, so in that case, if a driver is not leaving the platform and we have catered to it after 30 days, again, the model should say, why is it not going to leave the platform? Maybe we would not focus on it much, but the reasons should be exactly opposite to what the reasons were previously. Like, he's making money now, he's getting good amount of bookings, he is happy, and his probability to leave the platform is not even 5%. So that's where win-win situation comes. But we would be focusing more on, if he is planning to leave a platform, how would we make sure that he is not leaving a platform, and understand his sentiment. Okay, so previously I'll tell you guys, the companies like consulting companies like McKinsey, and let's say Boston Consultancy Group, BCG, Bain and Company, what do these companies do? These basically companies perform something known as qualitative research. Now, what is qualitative research? They go on the ground, they talk with the drivers, or they would be talking with their basically, let's say any of the client, like let's say if the Ola is the client for them, they would be going and talking with drivers, understanding their reasons, and those reasons will be converted to the variables and will go input to the model. That is also one kind of a research or one kind of interpretability, but that will not, that can't be catered to, let's say, 1,000 drivers. You can carry out a qualitative research for, let's say, 150, 200 drivers, understand their pain points, resolve the issues. But when if I say in Ola today, like there are nearly 6 lakh or 7 lakh drivers, how will you make sure that these 6 to 7 lakh drivers are happy? So in that case, the interpretability has to be very powerful. It has to be through some machine learning techniques. So this is one of the techniques where the interpretation plays a very major role. Okay, so this was the lime technique. Okay, now moving on to the next technique, which is again something known as a SHAP. Okay, this technique is known as Shapley Additive Explanation Technique. Okay, so there was one guy named Scott Lundberg. He is a very smart person who came up with this thing. So this technique came up while he was doing his study for game theory. So he was working on a game theory. At that point of time, he realized that if any of the games, like let's say in a chess, or maybe let's say in any of the games like tic-tac-toe, reinforcement learning agents are there which reward or penalize the model. But what if I also get to know what is the reason for which the computer is not playing good, or what is the reason that the computer is playing very good? Okay, so from there he came up with an idea to interpret basically the output of machine learning algorithms, which is nothing but known as model agnostic or model specific approximations. Okay, now this is a very interesting technique. Okay, now what this does is, here you would see there is something known as output value. Okay, now this output value is the predicted output value. Okay, like it's a regression problem, it's a predicted output value. Now this output value is, let's say, 157,334. Okay, 1,57,334. Let's say this is the average earning of a driver in a month. Let's just take an example like this. Okay, average earning of driver in a month. Now, I want to know what are the reasons for which my model is predicting this would be the average earning of a driver in a month. Okay, or is the average earning of driver in a month, like which all variables are contributing to that driver in that month for specific data set. Okay, so here you will see something known as higher and something known as lower. Okay, now what is this higher? Higher is nothing but telling you certain set of variables which are making it predict 1,57,334. Whereas the lower ones are the ones which are going against your prediction and are telling that it shouldn't be this. Okay, it shouldn't be this. Okay, and if you see on a higher side or on a lower side, every variable has a length or a bar. Okay, like if you see every variable has a length. So as you go towards the left, towards the tail, you would see the importance of the variable will go on reducing. Like this is 1.38 to the power into 10 to the power 5. This is 1.18. So if you see, the importance of that variable goes on reducing. Okay. So here it says at level, like let's say here, this is the example, but in let's say driver attrition, earnings, maybe number of bookings are so very high that is making predict that he is going to earn 1,57,000 rupees very easily. Okay, so that variable will be extremely important, and it also gives you the importance of that variable, and it also gives you the value of that variable, average value of the variable, what is making it predict 1,57,000 rupees. Getting? So this is what is the power of SHAP. Okay. Here it also tells you what is making it go against. Okay. What is not helping you predict this value. So now this is a regression problem. But what if we come to a classification problem? Okay. Let me give you the example. Like let's take an example. This is my output value. Now, what is it telling? Output is the probability of income over 50,000. What is the probability? 16% is the probability that he would be having an income of 50,000. Okay. Now, what is it telling? That it is having a probability of over 50,000. Now, 16% is very less. So obviously, if you see, the red color ones will be lesser dominating than the blue colored ones, right? Because it's just the 16% probability. Rest 84% probability is telling that is income will be lesser than 50,000. Now, what is making it say that is like let's say he is a married person. Okay, a married person. It's a female. Let's say it has no capital gains. He or she is working in a private company. So let's take an example, like he or she is a married person and has too many dependencies, and let's say there are several other factors which are not making it earn and telling that he is earning lesser than 50,000. Okay, now what is making it tell that he is earning over and above 50,000? Like let's take an example from the left. It says that his position is a managerial position. Now, ideally, it might happen that in the data set, the managerial positions would be having a higher salary bracket. They might be earning 60,000, 70,000. Age is 37. Now, age is 37 is also a lot. Today, people earn 50,000 at the age of 24, 25, like in the fresher stage itself, like in the first company. So it might happen that the age is also telling, okay, age is one of the reasons for which it is predicting that his income would be greater than 50,000. Like let's say number of hours per week, he is working 40 hours per week, which is a lot. Like if you say 5 days of working, he is working 8 hours a day, which is a lot. So like this, some variables are telling that his probability will be greater than 50,000. But now if you see, these are just three variables which I can see here, 3 to 4 variables. But if you see, there are nearly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and like this, so on. So if you see, this part is also left, and there are lot many variables which are actually telling that his salary should be lesser than 50,000. Okay, so for every row, for every person at every instance, whenever it predicts, it not just gives you the variable importance of the complete data set, but it gives you the variable importance for each and every variable. Okay, like through each and every variable, the probability. So if you calculate, the probability is nothing but the difference between this point and this point. So that is the importance of each and every variable. Okay, so like this, there is one more example. Like let's say 100% probability that his income is going to be greater than 50,000. Why? Because his capital gain is too high. He, let's say his age is 42, which is a lot. It has to be easily greater than 50,000. He occupation is, let's say, executive managerial. Let's just take an example. He is at the director level, or let's say it's above this managerial level. Okay. So at that point of time, the model is saying, okay, so these are the variables, and mostly, like let's say 90% of the people or 80% of the people in this model, in this data set, are earning more than 50,000. When such are the values, I would say that these are the reasons, specific reasons, top performing reasons for which I would be predicting that is probability of income would be to earn more than 50,000. Okay, to earn more than 50,000. So this is how this works. Now, why did I call it black box, guys? Okay, now, why did I call this technique as a black box? Okay, so see, inside this thing, whenever these things are getting plotted, the math has not been explored to a higher level. Okay, as in it's, I would say, exposed. My bad. So the math has not been exposed to a high to people who are actually working on these technologies. Like we don't know how is this working today in scikit-learn, or maybe let's say in TensorFlow, or multiple machine learning libraries. Okay, there are packages there are libraries there. We just load the library, we just fit this model, the SHAP.fit, and we get a graph plotted for it. In the backend, how it's working, it's still unknown. That's the reason how this technique was derived significantly, it's unknown. That's why it is called as black box. But in my experience of this 7.5, 8 years, guys, I have seen that whatever predictions it's giving in actual, okay, whatever predictions and reasons it is giving in actual, that significantly makes sense and is a huge transition in the field of machine learning interpretability. And they have been using, many industries have been using, people who are aware of it, they are using these techniques. Okay, they are using these techniques. Now, to make it more smarter, okay, this person not just made it one model or one SHAP model for all the algorithms, like classification, regression, deep learning. It's not like all three of them have one library to load. No. So SHAP model, which is there, provides different explainers. Explainers is nothing but your interpretability. So tree explainers provide XGBoost, support for XGBoost model, Light GBM model, CatBoost model, all those models basically. So there is something known as deep explainer. Okay, so this deep explainer, like as you know, deep learning algorithms, many of them have hands-on in terms of TensorFlow, Keras, and all, because the inferencing becomes faster in that case as compared to scikit-learn. So in that case, the tree explainer models will not work. Okay, so for deep learning models, he has specifically made a explainer which is known as a deep explainer, deep SHAP, which is known as. Okay, similarly, for kernel-based models. Now, what are kernel-based models? As you guys might be knowing, support vector machines. It's purely kernel-based model. Like you might have read across in your syllabus, all the kernels like radial basis function, all RBF kernels and normal kernel, linear kernel, RBF kernel. All these kernels are a part of support vector machines. So support vector machines would be using kernel explainers. Now, gradient explainers. Again, gradient explainers can be part of two models, like gradient boosting machine. Also, they are gradient based models, or specifically in deep learning models, like gradient descent algorithms and all, right? So that those are used for basically optimizing your weights and manipulating your bias and everything, right? So for that area, there is also something known as a gradient explainer model. So SHAP provides these different kind of explanation models. Okay, now this was about SHAP. Okay, this was about SHAP. Okay, so these are the two primary techniques. Okay, so now what are the important benefits of the SHAP? I think I might have covered it. Traditional feature importance algorithms will tell us which features are important, most important across entire population. As I told you, not just for SHAP, this is valid for Lime also. This any of the traditional machine learning techniques or anything, right? Feature importance will be on a complete data set. But if you see pinpointing a specific person, picking up that person and basically understanding the traits or the factors which are important for that person is done by this SHAP and Lime. Okay, and see if you see what is the importance of important benefits, right? So this whatever you are seeing previously, the graph which I showed you here, this was on a complete data set. Okay, but here it's on individual rows of data. Okay, this is for each and every unit of data, unit of a model target, if you see. That's why it is said that SHAP can quantify the impact of a feature on unit of the model target. Avoid decomposition matrix. This is much into technical. Let's not get into that. But yeah, so I'll get into what are the complexities of this slowly. So I gave you an example on the text-based data. So if you read this text, okay, if you read this text, and this is a rating of a person, okay, this is a rating given by, well, I mean, I would say review. Okay, and once you read this review, okay, it will classify what are the number of stars: 4 star, 3 star, 2 star, no stars other. So it's classifying 69% as the this thing probability. This is for Lime. So if you see, they have given the reasons. Now what is it calling it? Why is it calling as 4 stars? Because the word perfect is used, perfectly is used, fantastic is used, professional is used. All these keywords, with each and every keyword giving a getting a importance. So none of the NLP task will give you TF-IDF, or you, let's say, WADR sentiment analysis. All these things will give you importance on a complete data level, like a complete training data level. But when you want to do it for an individual row of data and you want to understand each and every metric here, none of the models actually does that. You have to get into the interpretability techniques. Okay, so this was the example of Lime here. This is an example of SHAP here. Okay, now in real world implementation, guys, so when it started, it was running on a single node. Okay, it was all basically in your local machines and all. But slowly and slowly, these models now can also be run in a distributed fashion. Okay, this can also be done in a distributed fashion. You have support in PySpark as well. Even PySpark supports it. So the PySpark has a support for these SHAP, Lime, and all these libraries basically, and different types of explainers. So now you can do it on a cloud-based environments also. So it started with first basic, and now it's been advanced a lot. And many industries are using it. I mean, I personally use it in many of my tasks. Okay, and yeah, so this was about SHAP and Lime. Okay, so before just winding up the lecture, I would like to also tell you the difference between SHAP and Lime, because that might be a question coming up in the questionnaire. So what happens is, guys, SHAP, if you see, like as I told you, SHAP has each and every explainer for different kinds of models. Okay, so SHAP is a time-consuming algorithm. Like when you keep it for running, let's say on a local host, let's just take on an example on a local machine, not on the cloud. Okay, at that point of time, even if you have 3 lakh rows of data, what happens is it will read each row by row. It will understand each row in a sequential manner. Okay, and will understand the reason for each and every row. And whenever you want to understand the predicted output for each and every row, it will give you the output. So it's a very time consuming interpretability technique. Both do it like that. But what is the significant difference between SHAP and Lime? First difference is having these three explainers. Okay, there are different kinds of explainers, which is the advantage of SHAP. Lime doesn't have that. Lime is not having that. Lime is having a simple one interpreter or one explainer which just reads the data and it gives you the importance in this manner, what you see on the right. Okay, so this was the first importance. Second thing is Lime doesn't support XGBoost. Okay, now why it doesn't support XGBoost? Again, there is a huge theory behind it. In XGBoost, basically there are sparse matrices coming into picture, and there is DTM type of data frames comes into picture. Right, at that point of time, The Lime was been introduced not to handle that, but a simple data frame. Okay, and in deep learning also there are several stages where we use matrix, we use complex matrices. At that point of time, Lime struggles to understand it. So you need to have a specific format of your training data or data frame, I would say, to understand that thing. Okay, so SHAP has all these facilities already, and it's more accurate. What do I mean by that is, like, let's say guys, in statistics also there are two tests. Let's take an example, chi-square test, and there is a Fisher vector test. Now what happens is, Fisher vector test will run on a smaller data set, but the accuracy for Fisher vector test will be higher compared to chi-square test. Why that happens is, Fisher vector test will go through each and every row, compare the things, and then come up with its results. Let's not get into what it does, but let's say it gives you a specific result. Okay, so what happens in that case is, it is a very time consuming thing. So that's why they use it on a smaller data set, but it is also used on larger data set, but it will take time. What the chi-square test does is, let's take an example. Let's say if you have 1,000 rows in your data. Okay, what it will do is, it will randomly select 500 rows from your data, smart way, in such a way that the distribution of that 500 rows of data, okay, will be same as the distribution of 1,000 rows of data. Now what do I mean by that is, let's take an example, like this is your curve. Okay, this is for 1,000 rows. Okay, 1,000 rows. So now what Lime will do is, it will exactly create similar curve with 500 rows of data, which will be exactly the replica of this curve. Okay, and it will run the interpretation on this thing, and it becomes faster. Now what happens guys in that case is, the accuracy goes for a toss. Like, you can't replicate a distribution from the population. Like we usually say in statistics, whenever we take any sample, we say like 95% confidence interval, 99% confidence interval. But what about that 5 percentile and 1 percentile? So you can have a similar distribution, but not exactly the same distribution in data. So that is what Lime does. Lime will pick up that chunk of data, which is exactly, not exactly, but similar in distribution as of the population, and run the interpretation on that thing. So this is a huge difference between Lime and SHAP. You can read the distinguish between Lime and SHAP on the internet. You would be finding these reasons, and that's the reason Lime gives a little less accuracy as compared to SHAP. Okay, so these are the reasons for which SHAP is preferred over Lime. But again, it depends on use case to use case. Like if you are running on a local, you don't have servers, you don't have cloud technologies, you are doing a short POC, and if you have 10 lakh rows of data, you can't sit for the time that SHAP will run and give us the results. You would rather prefer using Lime as a technique for understanding the data faster, and rest of your machine learning models remain same. So you run a machine learning model, you do a prediction, then you run a Lime or a SHAP on it, and that will give you the reason for which that prediction has happened. Got it? So I think I have pretty much covered it. Okay, so I have pretty much covered about it. So yeah, yes, Vedi. So I'm done with my presentation. So we can get into questionnaire sessions now.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Now I would request our audience, if anyone has any questions, then please post it into the chat box.
By the way, is it clear, guys? Like, yes, no, maybe if you guys can respond on a chat box. Is this clear what I was explaining? Okay, cool. Okay, thank you. So, any questions? So there is a question saying that how can I use machine learning in robotics and embedded systems? Okay, this is very interesting, Piyush. Okay, so though this is out of topic, but that's fine. See, robotics is a complete different field altogether. Okay, so there is something known as robotics operating system, which is ROS. Okay, so in robotics, okay, the ball game is very different. Their machine learning comes at a very later stage, like reinforcement learning. But first, what happens is we develop a set of commands, okay, which is nothing but I would write down here URDF notations. Okay, there are something but known as URDF notations or commands. So I am working on a robotic use case in Ola. Let's say we are building our manufacturing industry. We want to pick up something and we want to drop something. So first is basically a robot should understand the commands. So how does the robot understand the commands is nothing but known as the field of kinematics. What is it known as? Kinematics. Kinematics are of several types. Forward kinematics, inverse kinematics, differential kinematics. So these are basic. This is one of the techniques through which you basically give the suggestions, or I would say commands to a robot. It picks up and it drops, and the command and the system where you do it is nothing but known as ROS, robotics operating system. Okay, now once this is done, how machine learning is used on it? Like, let's take an example. I have three boxes. Okay, box number one is of, let's say, sports products. Okay, box number two is, let's say, of beauty products. Okay, box number three is, let's say, of any XYZ other products. Okay, now let's just take an example. In my box of sports products, there is a beauty item available. Like, let's say there is a cosmetic item available. Right now, these robots have been given a command that pick the sports product. Now it goes to the box of sports product and it picks up a item. Now, if you see, it will pick up an item and it comes a beauty product. Now tell me, this is a big blunder, right? So in this case, what happens is reinforcement learning algorithms are used, okay, which basically penalize the activity of the robots. So in robotics, in building a robot, you don't use any machine learning, but how the robot reacts with the environment, that's where reinforcement learning comes into picture. Like, if the robot is picking up a wrong thing, maybe we would penalize the robot for picking up the wrong thing. Getting? So that's how machine learning. Now, there are multiple areas where I can tell you about in the robotics where we can use machine learning, but this was a very high level example of how machine learning can be used in robotics to improve the robot's behavior with time, basically. Okay, I hope this is clear, Piyush. Okay, super. Okay, can you tell us how we can start for data scientists and required skills? Okay, guys, now let me explain you a big difference between a data scientist and a machine learning engineer. Okay, this will be my genuine advice to you all. Please do not take it in a negative sense or do not take it in a too much positive sense. Okay, there are two kinds of people. Let me just type it here, which is known as machine learning engineer, and there is something known as data scientist. Okay, there is a huge difference between that. Okay, so when you start your journey, like when I started back in 2013, I was not calling myself as a data scientist. What was I calling myself as machine learning engineer? Now, what is the task of machine learning engineer? Is to understand the algorithms. Like, to answer your question, how do we start? First, we should start with linear algebra. Okay, so if you see in linear algebra, there are lot many things. It's not just your matrix. It's not just your matrices. It's not just that. There are multiple things. There are, let's say, calculus involved with linear algebra, like, let's say, differential equations in matrices. There are Jacobians and lot many things, inverse matrix factorization, and all those things are there. So first thing is make your math strong with linear algebra. Okay. Okay. Next comes your statistics. Okay, now statistics is not just confidence interval, Z values, P values, T score, Z score. No, there is a lot of statistics involved. Like every machine learning model, what you are see, which we are building today, is just a model. Many people just run the model, come up in the Kaggle, they use Auto ML and multiple things, and just randomly come up with the results. They will win the competition and they will be happy. But you need to understand that in industries it doesn't work like that. It's not a static data. The data keeps on changing dynamically, and this changing of dynamic data is nothing but known as drift of the data. To handle your drift of the data very well, you need to have a very powerful statistics. Okay, you need to have a very powerful statistic. In statistics, you need to understand correlations, causations. So there is something known as inferential statistics. There is something known as descriptive statistics. There is something known as frequent statistics. This all things have to be learned end to end, not on a very high level. Now, once this is learned, this is optional, but I would say probability. Okay, probability helps you understand the conditional variances in the data, like how the conditions change in data to data, how the data shifts from one point to other point. So this is also covered bit in statistics, cumulative density functions and probability density functions, but primarily they are used in the probability. Okay, primarily they are used in the probability. Now, once this probability has been done, next comes your ML algorithms. Okay, now what are your ML algorithms? Starting from very basic linear regression, polynomial regression, lasso regression, ridge regression, regularization. So, all these things have to be covered. Now, once this is covered, once you work on these techniques for 3 to 4 years, you are qualified as a machine learning engineer, and in fourth and fifth year, you move on to your data scientist. Now, what is the role of data scientist? Whatever you see above has to be done, plus understanding the domain. Okay, understanding the domain well, which comes into picture. Now, domain, how is it learned? As whichever industry you work across, you have to you have to basically understand that industry well. Then comes your cloud technologies. Then comes your cloud technologies, like let's say AWS, GCP, Azure, all these things you will learn in your fourth and fifth year of career. Once that is done, you are qualified as a data scientist. And in your seventh or eighth year, which I am right now in, you get into a lead role wherein you micromanage all these things. But you drive your team by saying, okay, this thing has to be used. This is how you use statistics. These techniques will be used. These probability functions will be used. And then you basically deploy your models. Got it? I think I explained it pretty much in detail, Tanay. So I hope you are clear with it. Okay, super. Then there are multiple other questions. What do you think the impact of machine learning and AI has been on user experience? Uh, okay. See, I know. Like I'll give you an example on this thing. Uh, it has a positive effect as well as a negative effect. Okay, Sujot. So, negative effect is like people today, wherever even AI is not needed, okay, wherein you can actually solve the problem with sentiments. Like, let's say I'm running a company who has 5 drivers driving vehicles for me. Okay, now those kind of people also are, let's say, user experience for me will be a driver experience, like making sure that the drivers are driving well. Okay, now what is happening is, if let's say I run a company, I have 5 drivers. Okay, what I would say, okay, these are 5 drivers. I would talk, do qualitative research, do quantitative research, interact with them, have my sentiments involved, and improve the behavior. Okay, wherein AI is not needed. Okay, so now in these industries also, people are trying to use AI and they are overcomplicating it. Okay, What do I mean by overcomplicating is a driver who is happy with the earnings but is not happy with the quality of the car he is driving. Those drivers blindly, the machine learning model predicts that these drivers should be given incentives, and they have been given incentives. No doubt it's a happy situation for a user or the driver. They are being given extra, but it's a loss of the company, right? When he is already happy with the money, he is not happy with the change of car. You rather should have given him a new car to drive. Okay, not just incentivize him and like become a greed and just give him money and make him happy. So these are some negative impacts where we blindly rely on artificial intelligence without using ML interpretability. This is what I'm telling. But if you use ML interpretability, you would actually know that what is the reason for that user to be happy or sad. So now this is something which I feel is, if you need data science, use data science at that place. If you don't need data science, you shouldn't enforce upon to use data science. So negative impact is like too many things. Basically, I would say too many things leading to nothing. This is what it happens. Positive impact is that it's also helping the blue collar people, I would say, right? And Ola, if I would say, there are so many blue collar people who are like, who don't have jobs, and they are not able to make money while they are driving, but through machine learning algorithms and AI, we are understanding their pain points. Okay, we are trying to tackle their problems. Okay, and basis that we are helping them stay in the job, be happy in the system. So this is a positive experience on the driver side. So for us, I would consider driver as a user, but when it comes to the customer experience, we try to make it as good as possible. I know there are many problems across in tech industry. It's not just in Ola. You guys might not be getting bookings, okay? And you would say, oh, Uber is good, yaar. Uber sasta hai. Uber karenge, ye karenge. There are many reasons like this, right? Swiggy में ordering होता है, ordering जल्दी आता है, Zomato में order late आता है, right? And all these reasons come across, right? But you have to understand it's a tech. Okay, you have to understand it's a tech. To tech to work, suddenly the demand of user increases from 1,000 to 2,000 people. It becomes difficult to tackle, and that's where you would not get bookings. Okay, but that doesn't mean that our algorithms are not performing. So all these impacts are there on user experience, but we try to solve it using AI. But wherever we don't need AI, we shouldn't use AI. Got it? So Sujot, I hope I answered your question in detail. Yeah. Okay. Does Lime depends on loss value of ML models? No, Yash. Lime doesn't depend on loss value of ML models. As I told you, so it is not associated with any of your models as such. You model it, you predict it, you get the predicted value. Okay. But Sharp and Lime in itself is a model which understands through numerical values. Okay, now in backend, as I told you, it's completely a black box. We don't know whether it actually depends on loss or whether it's trying to understand the correlations or something in the backend. But it surely for this thing doesn't depends on loss value of ML models. It is purely a model in itself which understands, I would say, if it's an NLP, it understands the sentiments. Maybe it has a scoring in the backend, and basis that it gives you the score, but not through the loss models of the machine learning models which you run. Okay, so I hope, Yash, I cleared it out. Okay, next question. As I heard from many seniors that almost all companies, data scientists only hires postgraduates from high international university and all freshers. And being a data analyst, is there a huge scope in future? Okay. See, yeah, again, see, you can't change the truth. Okay. It might happen that people would come in this talk. You might be meeting many people actually telling, no, this is incorrect. But I would say, yeah, this is correct. Okay. This is a problem in industries. Okay. But see, when you say data scientist, Darshan, I would say yes, data scientist actually needs to have an experience of at least 4 years. So it's not just about being loyal to the candidate. Okay, it's also about from our end that we also need people who knows basics of data science. Okay, now let me tell you an example. The interns in my team. Okay, there are four interns in my team. There were four interns in my team. Now they were not from any tier one or tier two colleges. Okay, they joined as a machine learning interns in my team. And to be very frank, they did not have any experience in machine learning, and they were freshers out of college. Not college, they were, I mean, the last year of their college. Okay, they were good in software engineering. They started a little bit of statistics, but they did not know any of the machine learning models or anything. So usually when I hired them as machine learning interns. Okay, then they were learning machine learning from my end, like working on use cases. I was taking sessions for them, teaching them what are the concepts, various concepts like statistics, linear algebra, maybe twice in a week. And slowly, they interned across for 7 months in my team, and they were doing data analyst work also, like running SQL queries, Hive, and several other things. Okay, there were several other things like performing Excel analytics and all those things. Once after 7 8 months, they got converted to a full time thing. Now they got converted in a company like Ola, which is a unicorn company, as associate data scientist. So associate data scientist is nothing but a machine learning engineer. So yes, companies do hire this thing, but if you want to make a career in data science, I would say start with those companies where you would learn machine learning. You don't start with the big notch companies where you will be hired as a data scientist, but what you would do at the end is just run AutoML, just run H2O.ai. You would not learn the math behind it. You would not learn the stats behind it. And even if you get a chance to join that company, okay, even if you get a chance to join those top-notch big companies where, let's say, you don't get that much of exposure, I would suggest whatever I wrote about linear algebra, statistics, all those things, you should learn those things, okay, from your end parallelly. And when it comes to data analyst, see, now data analyst is a very different career, Darshan. So when I started my career in 2013, I started as a data analyst. Okay. Now I boiled down to data scientist because my interest was in data science. But as a data analyst, the scope is huge. But today, people have mixed the designations. Data analyst people want to become data scientists. Why? Because data scientist people get huge amount of money. Okay, that's the reason they get into it, but they don't actually realize in data analysis also there is big data, Hadoop, Hive. Inside Hadoop, there is Hive, Kafka, Spark. All these things are used for data analysis. Huge things are involved in data analysis. Okay. So, yeah, the scope is comparatively less due to data science, but this has been created by we human beings only. Okay. We only are doing this thing that data analyst is becoming data scientist, and then we are left with no choice but to select data science. Getting, but if you actually want to become a data analyst, you still can learn these Hadoop, Hive, and SQL, and all these Excel analytics techniques, and get into those companies which demand data analysis as a field and not just data scientist as a field. Got it, Darshan? I hope I answered your question. Mm, okay. So what else? Uh, what is the most striking difference between AI and ML? Okay. See, now AI is a artificial intelligence is like a ocean. Okay. What do I mean by ocean is like, let's answer in your format only. Whatever guys you asked me as a question, right? Robotics, you asked me. Someone is asking me about biomedical thing, like how machine learning is used in biomedical. And let's say there are multiple things. Someone would ask me, let's say, about the computer vision, image processing, all those things. So artificial intelligence as a field consists of these subfields. Okay, consist of these subfields inside it. Okay, now machine learning is not, see, they come up with these coined terms. Okay, decision scientist, okay, data scientist, okay, data analyst, okay, machine learning engineer, senior machine learning engineer. All these things are just named, but you have to understand there is a field which is artificial intelligence. Inside this, there will be several other fields like computer vision, image processing, this thing. You can say about robotics, you can say about this thing, AR, VR, virtual reality. All these things will be the part of artificial intelligence. Now, inside these, there are experts involved, like vision experts, okay, like robotics experts. So all these things are involved. Now, ML is nothing but a person inside each and every field who would be running the algorithms of that field. Like, let's say if you are in, let's say, vision, okay, you would be using vision techniques, right? You would be using OCR, Sobel filters, and all those things. If you are in, let's say, NLP, natural language processing, which is speech data, what would you do? You would use chatbots and all those things like NLU, RASA, all these algorithms, platforms you would be using to basically implement your task. So that ML guy will be doing that. So this is nothing but known as a machine learning guy. But the field is nothing but known as your artificial intelligence field. Okay. So I hope I answered this question, Nikunj. Okay. Okay. So I'll take this question. What is it? For ML engineer, what does a company expect from you as a fresher? See, if you ask me, okay, I would expect good amount of coding. To be very frank, not that much amount of coding that you need to be like a lead code champion or a hacker rank champion. Nothing. It should be like if I give you a simple task to write, like let's say write loops for loops, write functions, right? If I give you 5 minutes, 10 minutes, right? You should be able to write it. Okay. And the second thing is understanding at least what is data science, like what if very basics like supervised learning, unsupervised learning, not reinforcement learning, but understanding the theoretical concepts of this. So since I was also from Mumbai University, I know you guys would be having some electives, right? Machine learning electives, and image processing would be one of the electives, right? So all these things are there, right? So at least from a theoretical standpoint, you should be aware. You should not focus more on just running the models, like, oh, XGBoost ran in Kaggle and I am the winner. GBM ran in Kaggle, I'm the winner. No, you should understand what is XGBoost, what is GBM on a very high level if you want. And slowly, you will improve and you will get into math of it. So this is what I expect from an ML engineer. Okay. Like this is something which I would expect from an ML engineer. If you want to be my favorite, I would prefer linear algebra and statistics. So whenever I take interviews, I take last rounds of my interviews in my team, and I would just prefer understanding your linear algebra and your statistics. That is a core formation for a data scientist. If you are not having that formation, then it would become very difficult, at least in my team. So I have to reject, unfortunately, so many people who are very weak with linear algebra and statistics. Okay. So I think I answered Yash, right? Yeah. So Mridula is asking, would it be beneficial to do a master's in data science after college? Okay. Now this is also an interesting question. Okay, let me tell you the fact. So the four interns which I was telling you right before, those four interns, to be very frank, had the converts from San Diego, okay, which is a huge university, Columbia University. Three people were planning to go for masters, and there was one more university, Georgia Tech. If I couldn't remember the third one, but I think it was Georgia Tech. These three people left their masters and they continued working in Ola and are still working in Ola. Okay, now it is completely on you, Mridula. Okay, if a industry is helping you learn things like mathematics behind it, or you are getting time to implement those algorithms and not just run behind accuracy or results. Okay, if you know which use case, what model to use it, where to use it, like let's say on a numerical data, k-means will work well. Numerical and categorical data, a mix of little bit, but numerical should be dominating. On only categorical data, k-means will not work well. If such kind of things you are learning in industry, like where to use what kind of algorithms and all, then you don't need to immediately go for your data science, because if you work for 1.5 2 years, you can actually get a grasp of data science, and then maybe you can go for your masters later. Okay, but if the industry is not helping you with that and you want to continue your education, but it shouldn't happen, Mridula, that after 2 years of experience you just think, oh, I'm earning quite well because data scientist people earn quite well and I would not go for masters. That's not the case. If you are actually learning well, and if you really are learning and don't want to go masters, that is a separate case. But always in masters, they would be teaching more and more mathematical things. So Georgia Tech, Texas, they have many things involved in masters. They would be recapping you maybe some concepts what you learned in industry, but from an educational standpoint, yes, they would be helpful for you. Getting? So completely depends on how the industry you are joining in. Got it? So by the way, yeah, the students which I was telling, the interns are still a part of me, part of my team, and this year also they would be working with me into for 2.5 years. They would be working with me, and depends on their next steps. If they would enjoy liking, maybe they would work in my team. Okay, so it is completely like that. So I hope, Nudula, I answered your question. Okay. So Shubham, for mechanical engineers, how to start AI/ML? Mechanical engineers are needed as machine learning engineer. So see, Shubham, nowadays, I'll tell you very frankly, it's not just like mechanical engineer, computer engineer, and I don't see that I would not prefer just computer engineers. Okay, people who have actual interest in data science. Okay, people who like data science and who love data science. So as I said, people who are ready to do statistics, linear algebra. So I believe for mechanical engineers, electronic engineers, for electronic people they have embedded systems, right? You guys have C, C++, right? Now complete TensorFlow is written in that, right? So they are not computer engineers. So if they have an interest in those things, they can definitely get easily into AI/ML. So for mechanical engineers also, it's the same thing. Basics remain same for any field, whether you are like let's say a IITian, whether you are a non-IITian, whether you are from a tier 1 or whether you are from a tier 3, tier 4, everyone to learn data science, machine learning has to start with the steps which I explained above. Statistics, linear algebra, statistics, algorithmic knowledge, understanding theoretically, doing internships, publishing research papers, working on the research areas, and having some good mentors with you guys. Like you guys should have some mentors, and then joining a company as a machine learning engineer. Got it, Shubham? I hope I answered the question.
Thank you, sir. I
Yeah,
think there are no more questions, and I think we should conclude today's session. But
sure. I
before
think I
that,
exceeded. I
yes,
exceeded the
no,
time.
no,
Sorry
no,
for
that
that.
is completely all right, completely all right.
Yeah.
But before that, I would like to invite our vice chairperson, Akansha Nath, to uh, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
It is my extreme privilege to be presenting the vote of thanks at today's event. On behalf of our college, committee, and students, I would like to thank Mr. Hitesh Hinduja for taking out time from his busy schedule and giving such a great talk at Voyager 2021. Sir, it has been an immense honor to have had you with us today. I further extend my gratitude to our convener, Mrs. Ulka Padwarkar, and the teaching faculty for giving us this opportunity and motivating us to strive for success. A lot of preparation and hard work has gone into setting up this event. We are very lucky to have our team of dedicated student volunteers who work to make this happen. Last but not the least, we are very grateful to the audience for sharing their valuable time with us. I hope you all enjoyed today's talk and imbibed something new from it. Thank you everyone for joining us today. There's one announcement. Please fill the feedback forms as they enable us to keep providing you all with quality events. I would like to add that the e-certificates would be distributed using the data filled in that form, so please fill it carefully. Again, thank you so much for joining us today and have a great day ahead. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Let's stay connected on LinkedIn. So I've dropped my LinkedIn link. It would always be great. And any kind of advice in machine learning, data science, let's connect. Just give me drop me a message saying that you were from the VIT event. I would definitely help you with it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Bye bye.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
Thank you. Same to you.